I'm also proud to call him my fraternity brother in addition to being a brother in Christ. So a little background about Andy. Andy grew up in Philadelphia, right outside there, and then moved to Seattle in high school. Moved to Seattle after his dad, Richard Stearns, class of 1973, accepted an offer to serve as president of World Vision, a big, large relief organization. Andy came back to the East Coast, came to Cornell University, graduated in 2004 with a degree in government. Shortly after, he went on to work for American Express, and he has continued to work there for the past 7 or so years, holding numerous roles and leadership positions. Currently, he lives in the Bay Area with his wife, Kirsten. Andy considers himself to be an endurance sports junkie. He's completed 4 marathons, 4 triathlons, 300-mile cycling races, and numerous other road races over the past 5 years. So if there's one word that I would say about Andy, I'd say it would be passion. Passion for his fraternity brothers, for Cornell, for pursuing excellence at American Express, but most importantly, passion for Jesus Christ and the things that he calls us to care about. So with that being said, I'd like everyone to welcome Andy Stearns today.
Tonight I want to start out by reading a couple of Bible verses that have given me inspiration over my life. In Matthew 28:19 we read, "Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." In James 1:27 we read, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight with thanksgiving that we live in a place where we can get together like this to worship you, to talk about your plan for this world and how we fit into it. I just pray that you'll speak through me tonight, open the ears, the minds of those here, speak to them, call them where you want them to go. Amen. As James said, too close. My name is Andrew Stearns. I'm a committed follower of Jesus Christ, a lover of the poor and needy around the world, and a professional credit card salesman employed by American Express. You might be thinking right now that your speaker tonight should be a great pastor or missionary, someone who served God throughout the world in a long and courageous life, perhaps someone much older than me. So why, might you wonder, was I asked to speak with you tonight? Well, let's cut straight to the chase here. Most of you, perhaps 99% or more, are not going to be full-time missionaries when you leave Cornell. You likely came here to study law, engineering, hotel management, or some other professional pursuit. And in all likelihood, you will end up beginning a career in a field related to your studies. With an Ivy League degree, you'll very likely end up being successful in your own field. You'll develop a large and influential network, and you might make a great deal of money. So let's get back to that question. Why am I here speaking with you tonight? I think one of the most challenging things for young believers today, that's you and me, even though I'm getting on in years now, is the question of what is God's will for our lives? I've been to dozens of mission conferences. I always walk out thinking, man, that speaker killed it tonight. He's on fire for the Lord. It was just amazing. But let's be honest, he doesn't get my life. He's a pastor, he's a missionary. I'm just a normal guy. So how can I possibly apply the things he said? Doesn't he realize I work 60 hours a week? Doesn't he know that not everyone can be pastors or missionaries? If they were, who would support the church? So tonight, we're going to talk a bit about what I consider to be the most likely mission field each of you is going to end up on, your life. Your life is the missions field. Now you might be more confused. Why was a speaker brought to an event about going on missions trips to talk to you about how going on missions trips most likely won't be your mission, but your everyday life will? Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share a bit of my testimony and how going on missions trips and seeing the work of God around the world has greatly impacted my own personal missions field. A missions field that is made up of my career, my local church, my small group Bible study, and yes, serving God's children around the world and spreading His gospel in the way I am most equipped to do so. Perhaps tonight you can learn something from my story and begin thinking about missions in a whole new light. You might still be wondering about my qualifications to talk on such a subject, so I'll give you a few hints before we begin. Over the past 15 years, I've been on mission trips on 3 continents in 8 different countries: Mexico, Ghana, China, Mongolia, Zambia, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Kenya. That right there probably puts me in the missions trip junkie category. As James said, my father happens to run World Vision, one of the largest Christian relief and development agencies in the world. My wife, Kirsten, who's here with me tonight, also works for World Vision. I am a graduate of Cornell University, so are both my parents and my little sister. I get what it's like here. I understand where you're coming from and what your life is like. And finally, I'm just a normal person, like you, trying to do extraordinary things with my life through the power of Jesus Christ. So let's get started. I grew up in a small suburb outside of Philadelphia. I lived a life of privilege. My father was a corporate CEO. We lived in a 10-bedroom farmhouse and 5 acres of land, and I attended a private Christian school. Life was pretty good. But missions were also a big part of our family. My mother was the head of the annual missions conference at our church, and every year, my parents gave lots of money to missionaries, our church, and relief and development organizations. Each New Year's Day, my parents would gather all 5 kids around the dining room table, and my father would hand out stacks of poker chips with certain amounts of money denominated to them. He and Mom would then place note cards on the table with the names of all the ministries we supported written on them, and then the kids got to figure out where the money went. Pretty cool, right? And what did I care? It wasn't my money. It was Mom and Dad's, so this was pretty fun. Then in 1998, everything got a bit more serious. I was in my sophomore year of high school when my father got a call from World Vision, one of the world's largest Christian relief and development agencies. World Vision has an annual fundraising budget of approximately $2.5 billion, employs nearly 40,000 staff in 100 countries around the world. So what did they want? Well, their CEO was retiring and they were looking for a replacement. They wanted my dad to be a candidate for the job. To make a very long story very short, 6 months later my father was named as the CEO of World Vision, which meant that my family was moving 3,000 miles away to rainy Seattle. This wasn't exactly a fun exercise anymore. I was finally just breaking out of my shell in high school. I was a dork like many of you probably growing up. A lot of Cornell kids were. I finally had a girlfriend. I was just picked to run varsity track. I had aspirations of attending this great Ivy League school on the East Coast named Cornell University. I was fairly certain that moving 3,000 miles away was pretty much going to ruin my entire life. That summer, after finishing the school year, my family packed up everything we owned and we moved across the country to Seattle. I was devastated. My younger siblings were young enough that this wouldn't impact their lives so much, and my older sister was already off in college. But me, poor me, I was just coming into my own in the wild world of high school. That my father was sacrificing his incredible career, taking a 75% pay cut, trading in the keys to the company Jaguar, and giving it all to God was somewhat lost on me, a spoiled rich kid from Philadelphia. You see, missions was cool as long as it didn't impact my life. I was completely fine with helping the poor people and serving the Lord as long as my life wasn't inconvenienced. I spent the first 6 months after our move moping around the house, mouthing off to my parents, and generally being a punk kid. My life was pretty tough, you see. I had to move from one beautiful, affluent suburb in America to another. Pretty rough life, don't you think? I wasn't so concerned with the people my father was going to serve in his new job. I was just worried about my future. Cornell seemed out of reach, 3,000 miles away. Although my girlfriend and I had pledged undying love for each other, we were broken up about 2 months after the move. And man, did it rain a lot in Seattle. Our first winter there, we went 96 consecutive days without a sunbreak. Yes, sunbreak is a real term in Seattle, meaning that the clouds would actually part, even for a moment, to let the sun shine through. 96 days without seeing the sun. Life was over. For spring break of my junior year, my father asked me to go on a trip to Mexico with him to see World Vision's work there. This was missions trip number 1. He thought that maybe if I saw the work firsthand, my heart might soften up a bit. I agreed. There could be worse things than going to Mexico with your dad for spring break. What I saw in Mexico shook me to my core. All of my misconceptions about poverty were turned on their head. I saw small business owners struggling to feed their families, mothers slaving away day and night to put food on the table, and the love of Christ being spread through the work of World Vision. One man I met had received a small business loan from World Vision and devised a machine so complex you would have thought he had a Cornell engineering degree. His machine took a spool of copper wire and automatically turned it into chains. He was then reselling these chains in the United States as high-end dog leashes. So much for the poor being lazy and uneducated. I came back with a new outlook on life, but I still wasn't convinced 100%. After all, Dad was the CEO, and they certainly rolled out the red carpet for him. They probably lined up the best examples of their work, too. And Mexico, by many standards, is better off than most of the rest of the developing world. No, I wasn't convinced, and I needed to see more if I would be totally sold on this whole missions thing. After we got back, I told my dad I wanted to go on another trip, alone, something more hardcore. This certainly came back to bite me. A week or so later, my dad came home from work, and I was sitting on the couch doing some homework. He walked over and tossed an envelope in my lap. I asked what it was, and he said, "It's your plane ticket to Africa. You leave the day school gets out. Have a nice summer." And he talked about calling someone's bluff. Missions trip number 2. At 17 years old, armed with 2 duffel bags, a World Vision video camera, and $400, I arrived in Accra, the capital city of Ghana, after flying halfway around the world. I was alone and scared stiff. I was to spend the summer working on a well drilling rig, drilling for water in some of the most remote parts of Ghana. After spending a weekend in the capital city with the World Vision family, I was sent out to the bush to begin my assignment. Right before I left, the 19-year-old son of the World Vision worker I was staying with asked me where I was going. When I replied with the name of the town, he said, "Really? Even I wouldn't go there, and this is my country." This was going to be the real deal. After about a 10-hour truck ride, dangerous ferry crossing, and too many close call moments on the road, I joined up with the drilling crew. They thought this was pretty fun, and a Bruni, or a white person from America, that could do all their dirty work for the summer. And work I did, digging trenches, freeing our trucks from the mud, carrying supplies to and from work sites, and much more. I spent 6 weeks with the crew in their camp, eating their local food and generally trying to survive. No showers, no home-cooked meals, no phones, no internet. We were out there. But God has a sense of humor. I was fairly certain with the move to Seattle that my dreams of attending Cornell were over. It was just too far away. But here in rural Ghana, hours from the nearest paved road, God thought it would be fun to play a little joke on me. Can you guess where the head engineer on our water project got his degree? A little engineering school in upstate New York, thousands and thousands of miles away, called Cornell University. What a coincidence. And then, after weeks without seeing another American, we were driving through the village and I noticed a white woman walking along the road. I asked our truck driver to stop, and I asked her what she was doing there. She was on assignment from a small veterinary school in upstate New York, training farmers for methods on keeping their livestock healthy. Yes, you guessed it, Cornell University again. Maybe God was trying to tell me something. Maybe he was in control after all. I could share a lot of crazy stories from that summer in Africa, but we don't have all night. I returned home a changed person. I saw the world a little differently now. Maybe living in beautiful Seattle, Washington wasn't so bad after all. I ended up deciding to apply early decision to Cornell, wrote my essay about my epic journey to Africa, and got accepted. In the fall of 2000, I moved into North Baker Hall on West Campus to begin my Cornell journey. That was when freshmen still lived on West Campus. I quickly became absorbed with all the amazing opportunities on campus. I joined the Delta Phi fraternity, that's Lenrock for those of you that don't know, and I applied to be a resident advisor for the freshman class of 2001. My second year at Cornell was also a blur. RA duties, fraternity meetings and parties, a new girlfriend, and of course, my classes. Although I continued to attend church at Christ Chapel, I largely lost focus on my faith and God's calling for my life. The pastor there is with us tonight, and he actually married my parents in 1975. I moved into Lenrock my junior year and became more involved in the fraternity, serving as social chair, vice president, and pledge master. I was totally distracted from God and focused solely on my own activities. And then that next summer, I got to go on mission trip number 3. My parents took our entire family, yes, all 7 of us, to China and Mongolia for 3 weeks to visit with World Vision staff and see their work. This should have been a well-needed shot in the arm and a wake-up call of how far I had drifted from God, but unfortunately, it didn't really do the trick. I'm not sure what it was. Perhaps I was too distracted by my plans to head back to school for my senior year. Maybe it was the old truck I had just bought that was in the repair shop back home. Or maybe I was just too selfish at the time to let God in. We toured through China, visited the Great Wall, saw the terracotta warriors, visited children in orphanages, ate meals with local families in their homes. It was a nice trip with my family, but for some reason, it didn't hit home like the previous trips had. I headed back to Cornell for my senior year in the fall of 2003 and was quickly reabsorbed into the college lifestyle, finishing my degree and looking for my first job. After interviewing during the winter, I received and accepted a high-paying job offer from a direct marketing firm in Connecticut. Life was starting to look pretty good. After graduation, I began work and found yet again another place to pour all of my energies. I was working 100+ hours per week, rarely going to church, and was largely focused on my career and my next promotion. I did well in my first job, but was only there for a year. A few friends from Cornell were working at American Express and they encouraged me to apply. I did and received a job offer in New York City, and the prospect of working for a Fortune 100 company was too good to pass up. So I moved into the city and began working there in 2005. Talk about finding more ways to distract yourself. The new job, the New York nightlife, bars, restaurants, concerts, you name it, I was doing it. I was fortunate enough to move in with a Christian guy and started attending church more regularly. However, I still wasn't focused on God the way I should. And life was going really good, so why mess with something if it isn't broken? I was promoted 3 times in my first 3 years at American Express, was making good money, and I was spending it all on myself. I even racked up a bunch of credit card debt. New York was really expensive. But this certainly didn't seem like what God had planned for me. In 2006, I met Kirsten, and she ended up being the angel I needed to begin getting my priorities straightened out. We were actually introduced by a mutual friend because Kirsten was interested in working at World Vision, and the friend thought I could answer some questions for her. I agreed to meet her, not realizing she would be a gorgeous blonde who worked in fashion at Kenneth Cole. We hit it off right away, and even though she tried not to date me because she thought it would be awkward at World Vision, my charms eventually won out. The real reason I know that God brought her into my life was the fact that she was an accomplished athlete and was training for her first triathlon. And at the time, I was 50 pounds overweight and hadn't been in the gym in months. She later told me that she has no idea why she liked me because she never dated fat guys before. She won that battle. Not 3 months after we started dating, I had lost 30 pounds and completed my first 100-mile bike race. Endurance sports have been a shared passion ever since. Kirsten not only set my physical shape back on the right course, but she challenged me to be the spiritual leader of our relationship and demanded that it be a priority in our lives. Kirsten landed the job at World Vision that fall and began working in the New York offices. We got engaged in 2007 and began to plan our wedding. Things were going great at work, and I continued to excel in my career. I won many high-level awards at American Express and continued to make more and more money. That was the goal, after all, right? The Cornell dream. Well, Dad showed up again with a little tough love once we got engaged. He sat us down and told us that he thought it was very important for us to begin tithing as a couple right away. I was busy trying to figure out how to pay for a wedding and a honeymoon, and I told him we'd sort it out after the wedding. He said not to wait, that it would only get harder with time. He knew that if we got our financial priorities straight at the onset of our marriage, the rest of our priorities might follow. We decided to take this advice and began tithing together as a couple, and started sponsoring several children through World Vision. In 2008, the summer before we got married, I had the opportunity to travel overseas with World Vision yet again. Mission trip number 4. I went to Zambia and South Africa with my parents and my younger sister. In Zambia, I was reconvicted in my beliefs that I should be serving the poor with my life. I actually got to spend the afternoon with a boy I sponsored for several years and decided to help him continue his education. Kirsten and I signed on to send Jackson and his brother Moses to a private boarding school to finish high school. I came home invigorated, but yet again, got sucked back into my everyday life, planning a wedding and honeymoon, and continuing my career at American Express. Just before we got married, I was promoted again to a high-level position doing business strategy for the head of American Express's sales division. More money, more success. I finally had my head on a bit straighter, and Kirsten and I sought out new ministries that we could invest in both financially and with our time. I was regularly volunteering with her work at World Vision. I joined the board of a local charter school, and we began sponsoring a student ministry at Columbia. I know, but what more could God want from us? Mission trip number 5. In May of 2010, 2 years after our wedding, Kirsten and I had the opportunity to travel to Africa together for the first time. We went to Ethiopia with my parents and the Christian author Max Lucado and his family. This was the first time Kirsten and I experienced poverty and God's work firsthand as a couple. We even got to meet one of our sponsored girls, and we visited with many people who were benefiting from the work of World Vision. We came back, yet again convicted of our calling to serve the poor with our lives. After a few months, though, we were reabsorbed into our daily lives and began to focus on next steps for our careers. How quickly we get distracted. You noticing a pattern yet? Looking back, It's unbelievable how dense I can be at times, and I'm constantly amazed that God continues to pursue me. In the summer of 2010, I was promoted yet again and was relocated by American Express from New York to San Francisco, where I currently lead a sales team covering Northern California, Oregon, and Nevada. I had essentially become a made man at American Express. They continue to invest in my career. I now manage a $200 million business for them on the West Coast. With this promotion came, you guessed it, more money. When we moved just 18 months ago, I still didn't totally get it. I didn't understand what God had in store for me. Kirsten and I began to make plans to buy a house. This wasn't an issue in New York, where parking spaces cost $500,000, but in California, it was more realistic. My bonus for the 2010 year was, in and of itself, enough for a down payment on the house, and we were eager to find a place to settle down. That was until God showed up in a very real way. And I finally, after 15 years of playing dodgeball with God, began responding to his calling in a real way. Kirsten and I joined a church in our new hometown and began attending a couple's Bible study, where we were really the only people who experienced God's work outside of the U.S. As a group, we began reading Francis Chan's book, Crazy Love. If you haven't read it, to summarize, the book essentially says, if you really truly know what you know, and you believe what you say you believe, why are you living the way you were living? Man, this really hit home. I knew more about God's work, about his mission to serve the poor, about his work around the world than almost anyone on the planet. I had, in fact, seen it firsthand, not on one, not two, but 5 separate occasions. And yet here I was, trying to figure out how to spend that $75,000 that he just dropped in my lap on myself. How blind could I be? Here I was, reminded time and time again, over my life, about how our brothers and sisters in Christ are hurting around the world, and all I could think about was how to spend more money on myself. Money I did not need, money that was God's in the first place. Our small group followed Crazy Love with a detailed study of my father's own book, The Hole in Our Gospel. This was the 1-2 punch. Not that I hadn't read my father's book before, but following the gut check from Francis Chan, it really hit home this time. Kirsten and I decided it was finally time to get serious for God, to really change our priorities, and to actually focus on his will, not ours. A quick side note on Kirsten's job at World Vision. It's awesome. Her team recruits amateur athletes across the country to run marathons and half marathons to raise money for World Vision's clean water work in Africa. Each year, thousands of runners compete in races across the U.S. and raise millions of dollars for World Vision. Well, last year, Kirsten's boss wanted to take a team of athletes to Kenya to run the Nairobi Marathon. He called me in the spring and asked me if I would be a part of a team, just 12 runners raising $500,000 for kids in need in Kenya. I committed. Then came the hard part, how to raise the money. Each runner had a goal to find sponsors for 50 children, which equates to about $50,000 for World Vision's work. I hate asking my friends for money, namely because I make more than most of them. Kirsten and I decided that the only way we would feel comfortable asking our friends for money was to offer them a match. For each child that our friends sponsored, we would give an additional $1,000 to World Vision. This was going to be above and beyond our normal tithing, not in place of it. We put our plans to buy a house on hold and threw ourselves into our new mission. And it turned out to be the most rewarding thing we've ever done, and revealed to me, for the first time, my mission field. You see, I have a very hard time talking about my faith at work, with my non-Christian friends, and with people I come into contact with. One reason at work is that I'm not supposed to talk about it, especially when you're a leader. It's out of line in a big corporation. But guess what isn't out of line? Talking about your plans to run a crazy marathon in Africa and asking your friends to be a part of it. This commitment to physically do something for Christ opened up doors that I had never thought of knocking on. After many letters, phone calls, and personal conversations, I succeeded in my campaign to find sponsors for 50 kids. Nearly 20 of them were sponsored by my coworkers. People who I was not allowed to share my faith with, but I got to anyway because of my crazy adventure. This was my missions field. All of those mission trips I had gone on weren't the end goal. They provided the foundation, the fuel, and the courage to take on this crazy mission to raise money to help our brothers and sisters in Christ around the world, and in turn, to share my personal faith with dozens of friends and coworkers. One couple in our Bible study, they're about 25 years old, had never even heard about world poverty before we met them, and they sponsored 15 kids themselves. They are now volunteering at World Vision and living out their mission. Mission trip number 6. We had fulfilled our commitment, found sponsors for 50 children, and wrote a check for $50,000 to World Vision. And it was the least stressful thing, the most freeing thing that I've done in my career so far. I had broken the curse of trying to live up to